Hey guys, what's going on? So today I have an album review for Defeated Sanity's Disposal of the Dead / DHARMATA. This is their latest release until their new album comes out in July. Speaking of which, I heard the new song that came out last night. Fucking amazing. I'll probably do a track review for it after next video. Background, listening to Visceral Discordia and Jesse Petrucci. I gotta do a review for this album. I've been listening to this a lot past couple months. Fantastic, slamming, brutal death metal. So yeah, this is a really polarizing release for a lot of people, and I can understand why, because they got really experimental with the DHARMATA side of this. This album is divided into two parts. I don't know if you really call it an album, but it's technically an album. But the first half is called Disposal of the Dead, and it's like it's kind of like a business as usual for Defeated Sanity, but it's a little bit more oriented on like simple rhythms. It's not quite as technical. There's still some of that jazzy kind of progressive stuff in there, but it's not as much of the focus on Disposal of the Dead. It's a little bit more about just groove and simple vocal patterns and stuff. Definitely some of the slammiest stuff Defeated Sanity has done. It's not slam by any means, but it's got a lot of those kind of chunky riffs. I mean, Defeated Sanity have always had those, but they're a little more simple than usual on Disposal of the Dead. And DHARMATA is like straight up progressive death metal. Very different. That's the reason why people don't like this release, is because DHARMATA is like, I guess you could call it like cynic worship, like cynic's focus. It's very similar to that. Some people say it sounds like old, like human and individual thought patterns era death. I don't know about that. It kind of does in some parts. The vocalist on that side of the album, there's two different vocalists, of course. I want to say the guy in Disposal of the Dead is the same guy from the album before this, Passages into Deformity, but I'm not entirely sure. But DHARMATA, I know for a fact, is a different vocalist, and he has a more of like that thrashy, kind of raspy shout. You know, he kind of sounds a little bit like Chuck, and a little bit like the guy from Cynic. I'd say it sounds more like Cynic than Death, though. It's not really thrashy, or like, it doesn't sound like old school death metal, or that era of death really at all. So there's two album covers, but this is the one for Disposal of the Dead. I keep that on here because I think this art looks better. You know, pretty cool. I want to say that was done by John Zig. Pretty awesome. There's the back track listing. We got on Disposal of the Dead. We have Remodio Mortorum. It's like an intro. Into the Soil, Consuming Grief, Generosity of the Deceased, Sati or Suti. I don't know how you pronounce that. And the Bell. DHARMATA. You have the title track DHARMATA. The Mesmerizing Light, At One with Wrath, The Quest for Non-Existence, and Return to Samsara. Excuse me. There's the disc. You just have this thing that's like a mashup of the two artworks, which of course the artwork for DHARMATA is right here. It's pretty cool. Funny sample. So obviously on this side you have all the lyrics for DHARMATA, and then what's all this? Just thank yous and a picture of, I guess, both line up, well, same band, but obviously just two different vocalists, I guess. And then it's turned upside down. A reference shows to DHARMATA, Disposal of the Dead. So then you obviously turn it down for the rest of Disposal of the Dead. You got lyrics for that. Pretty cool little booklet. So anyways, I'd say I definitely prefer Disposal of the Dead, just naturally because I like that kind of stuff more. I mean, DHARMATA is a very, like, it's a good listen. It's not, I don't listen to DHARMATA as often as I do Disposal of the Dead because it's just not as much of my cup of tea. But it is still really cool. That cynic kind of style of death metal it's definitely unique, and it's kind of refreshing to listen to once in a while. I don't listen to Cynic that much, but I do think they're a cool band. I don't know. I'd say Disposal of the Dead. I'll talk about both individually. Disposal of the Dead. The production on Disposal of the Dead is, you know, Defeated Sanity have never really been a band to have like safe production. And by safe, I don't mean like clean, but like because they've had clean production before, and the production on here is pretty clean, but it's not overproduced like a lot of modern brutal death metal is, and it's not very like. It's still kind of dirty sounding. It still has that like energy to it. Disposal of the Dead, the intro track is pretty cool. Not my favorite intro from Defeated Sanity, but still pretty solid. Into the Soil, probably the best song on this whole CD. It's so good. Opens up with like some blast beats and stuff. And it goes right into this really slammy riff that's just super catchy. Really pingy snare tone on Disposal of the Dead side. Consuming Grief is also really cool. Generosity of a Deceased, really groovy, catchy intro. A lot of the vocal patterns on Disposal of the Dead are a lot more simple and more akin to something you'd hear in like kind of like a more slammier brutal death metal band, maybe like DHARMATA or something. Or maybe not, I don't know about DHARMATA, maybe like Dying Fetus. They're not slam, but similar vocal patterns, just the simple, short, chunky vocal patterns. But yeah, the last track on Disposal of the Dead, the bell kind of blends into DHARMATA. It's kind of cool. It kind of bleeds in because you start hearing those progressive kind of influences start to shine a little bit towards the end of the track. And it just kind of fades into the first track on DHARMATA, which I think is really cool because it makes it sound more cohesive and less like some, I don't know, like a split EP or something. They sound like two different bands almost, but it doesn't sound like there's a solid transition. That's what I'm trying to say. So DHARMATA, lyrically, it's more like it's a little more personal lyrically with tracks like Return to Samsara and The Quest for Non-Existence. I'd say it's kind of melodic, but in a progressive kind of way, not in like a melodic death metal or like just like pretty neoclassical melody kind of way. I'd say probably the best track on DHARMATA is probably either At One with Wrath or Return to Samsara. DHARMATA is cool. There's a few parts where that sounds just a little gimmicky, but it's still cool. DHARMATA is really heavy on atmosphere. There's just this very relaxing kind of atmosphere, kind of otherworldly sounding. It's a very adventurous sounding piece of music. I could definitely say that. Not as much of my forte, like I said, as the more brutal death metal Disposal of the Dead side. I don't know why I'm saying side. It's not like a record. It's not like I own the vinyl copy. That's what I meant to say. But the Disposal of the Dead half is just clicks with me more. But DHARMATA, like I said, it's still a refreshing listen. There's some really great solo work. All the instruments shine really well. There's some clean guitars. There's some distorted guitars. There's some really interesting, really jazzy, really progressive, unique sounding drumming. The vocals aren't really my favorite part of DHARMATA. That vocal style, I'm just kind of alright with. Not really anything that does a ton for me. It's still cool. He sounds like this vocalist of Cynic or the vocalist of Death. Kind of death thrashy vocal style. Not really unintelligible. You can make out most of what he's saying, but kind of that raspy, kind of shouty thing. It still sounds cool. It's just not my favorite vocal style in particular. But DHARMATA, it's still really good. It's just not my cup of tea. I know a lot of people like to shit on this release. I don't think it's that bad. It's definitely different. I can understand why some people wouldn't like DHARMATA, but I don't think it's objectively like it sounds like shit. So there's no like cringy moments. It doesn't sound like terrible. It's just very different for Defeated Sanity. And I don't know, if you want to get into Defeated Sanity, this is not the album to start with at all. It's just such a different album for them. Even Disposal of the Dead, like I said, it doesn't sound like your typical Defeated Sanity. That one's a little more brutal than usual. Or at least leaning a little more towards traditional brutal death metal. As opposed to the more proggy stuff Defeated Sanity has. It almost sounds like they like split up their sound into like two halves of the album. They just expanded on the more brutal side with Disposal of the Dead, and they expanded upon the more proggy side with DHARMATA. I don't know, but both are really cool. I would probably give this like an 8 out of 10. It is a very solid release. This is also probably Defeated Sanity's longest album that they have. I want to say this is like 50 minutes or something, somewhere around that mark. But pretty cool. This came out in like 2016. So yeah, Defeated Sanity's 5th release. Or, not counting like demos and shit, but their 5th, I guess, full length. I guess I could call this a full length. It's just a very weird, experimental full length way it's divided up. But yeah, Disposal of the Dead / DHARMATA, 8 out of 10. Solid album. Not my favorite from them, and definitely not their strongest. But it is it's a cool release because it's different from the rest of their albums. It's not just another generic full length album of them doing their business as usual. which wouldn't be a bad thing at all, but it's nice to see some bands kind of changing it up in that way. So yep, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.